I was born in the United States, but my family is long generation from Trinidad and Tobago. So both of my parents were Trinidadians, emigrated to the United States, and had a brother who was 11 years older. But we lived very much like Trinidad was here in the United States with us, and we didn't know that there was any other way, that Americans were living any different than we did. And we were on Riverside Drive in New York City, so that seemed kind of nice. And then we went back to Trinidad, and my earliest memories really from like age 2.5 to 3, we were in Trinidad, and then we came back to the States, and I started school, kindergarten, in the United States. So all of my education was here.
While you were growing up, you and your family all practiced a religion. So can you tell me about that?
Oh, yes. Well, Trinidad was largely Muslim or Hindu, and then the majority of the population, though, was Roman Catholic. So we practiced. It never occurred to us to change and look at it or examine it. It was just something that we did. We all got up Sunday, and we all went to Mass together, and my brother, my mother, my father. My parents put me into parochial school, which was sort of the local Catholic school from your community. That was interesting. I didn't quite know what I was supposed to be doing, but I thought it was good to go to school, and it was a fun way to meet people. So yes, the religion played a part, but it was, I don't want to say a mechanical part. It was just something you did, and you didn't think about it, and it didn't have an intimate application to life. And yet it was superimposed on how you structured your week.
Mm-hmm. So while you were going through school, in either country, maybe you could compare the two, or talk about that?
I can talk about it, but not exactly firsthand. I didn't go to school in Trinidad. We came up here in time for me to start in kindergarten. But I knew from talking to my cousins who were all enrolled in school in Trinidad, and actually later on in life my children went to school in Trinidad, that it was a very, our schools here in the United States were considered very liberal, very free. We didn't consider them that way in the States, but to a British system, which was what Trinidad was at that time. It was under the British rule, and they used a very English system of education. It was extremely different. I mean, the children were all in uniform, which wasn't so terribly different, but the bulk of the learning in early childhood was all memorization. You started the day with reciting a whole bunch of spelling words, then they recited a whole bunch of times tables, then they recited geography. Whereas in this country, the learning was more, even at that time, and we're talking like 1945, 46, even then, the learning in a public school setting was more involving to a young child. I went from parochial school, Catholic school in this country, to public school in 3rd grade. I thought I'd gone to heaven. I thought, these kids, oh, they have gym, they have music, they have art. Okay, in the parochial school we had a little bit of that in the United States. In Trinidad, in the early grades, and at that time, there wasn't any gym, there wasn't any music, there wasn't, you went there and you learned it exactly, and you learned it by rote. And you were expected by, let's say, age 12 to have mastered a very stringent curriculum set by the English. and take your exams that were English exams. It was very different. They didn't, I won't say they weren't comparable, but they were just a totally different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no, it sounds funny in this country to say it, there was no parental involvement. School was the child's job. You went to school, you did your homework, you got dressed the next day in your uniform in Trinidad, and you went to school. Your parents didn't come to school, they didn't call, they didn't, none of that. None of that.
Later in 1960, when you went to college, can you tell me about like the college process and how you decided to go where you went? And
Wow. I think my father got to come to the United States because he got a huge island scholarship from Trinidad. There was no looking around for what college he might want to go to, what university he might like. He was just he was very smart and got this great scholarship. He never would have left Trinidad otherwise. So my mother never finished high school in England.
mm-hmm.
So they had no way, none, of guiding me as to how to choose a college. How do you decide where to go? How do you look at what you want to do? For my mother, it was more, well, you don't want to go far from home. We want to be able to see you. And I'd never been away from home, so far from home seemed scary instead of looking like an opportunity. For my father, he went all the way through with scholarship. They scholarshiped him from Trinidad to Louisiana. When he finished his undergraduate degree in Louisiana, he brought down a scholarship for a PhD at MIT. Yes, the whole bit. I mean, this young man from Trinidad, and there he was in Boston. So he really didn't know anything about the choosing process either. It wasn't that they didn't help. I don't think they could help. The high schools, this was 1958, 59, I guess they would help you. But if you came in there with, well, I think I'm going to go to this school, they'd say, fine, go to that school. They really didn't do anything to advise you or to look at what your abilities were or where your interest lay.
Yeah.
You just went. So my mother had said, I don't want you to go too far away. And I think I was scared too also. I had been in a co-ed high school, public high school, which I enjoyed. And I didn't feel, I don't know, I wasn't so committed to going to a co-ed university. At that time, the Seven Sister Colleges and these women's colleges were very well respected. But I don't know why, I had a funny feeling that if I didn't do something to learn a lot more about religion, mine and others, not just mine, that it would have no meaning in my life and that I was going to toss it. And I don't know why. I just thought it would be good to give it a fair chance. I mean, what a stupid way to go to college. I think I'll give religion a fair chance. And there was this small women's college, very well ranked, smart people in it. And I thought, well, all right, I'll apply. So I applied to Manhattanville College of the Sacred Heart. It was very Catholic. It was run by a foreign order of nuns who all had PhDs. They were referred to as the Madams de Sacré-Cœur of the Sacred Heart. I don't think I had any idea what I was getting into. I went in for an interview and I didn't apply to anywhere else. That's how little I knew about going to college. I applied, I thought, this looks interesting. And worse than that, I applied as a science major. Who goes to a small all-girls Catholic college as a science major? They usually go they had a great music school. So they were known for their Pius X music school.
Mm-hmm.
And they had good English department, philosophy, theology. So having applied to nowhere else, and I got offered a scholarship to Skidmore for languages, yes, which my mother said, oh, you can't go, that's too far away. So we ditched Skidmore in Spanish, and I ended up at Manhattanville. But it was a choice that it wasn't made with a whole lot of intellectual confidence or maybe the proper research, and yet part of it turned out to be a proper choice, not all of it.
College life once you were there, and like what you did on the weekends, how that functioned.
You would be, I think people who know university life now in 2017 in any part of our century would be stunned by what our college life was like in the 1960s. So you picture the very conservative women's college life. Picture the Seven Sisters, the Vassar and Radcliffe and all of these, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Manhattanville was like that, and then you add on a layer of very Catholic on top of that, and the in loco parentis, which was the role of the college, I won't say administration, but they were there to keep you safe, and by heavens, you were going to be safe. All right, freshman year, okay, you think you're getting away from home. Woohoo! Okay, turning loose. Freshman year, we were all in dorms, and at 10 o'clock, lights out. Not 10 o'clock you stopped doing your homework or anything else. You could do your homework, but 10 o'clock lights out, and you were in your room and you were going to sleep. And the next morning, in your dorm room, when you got dressed and went to class, someone would come round and check the dorm rooms to make sure your beds were made. Yes. So, and you didn't even need to bring a pair of jeans to college with you because you were never going to wear them. You could wear them in the upstairs rooms of the dorms. You couldn't wear them downstairs in the common rooms. You always had on a skirt or a dress. Dinner at night, when you went to the dining hall, we dressed for dinner. So exhausted or tired or overworked or whatever, you wore stockings and heels, and you dressed for dinner and went to dinner. You didn't go out. Freshman year, you didn't go out at all during the week. By junior year, you could get permission and sign out with a pre-approved permission. Remember, we still have in loco parentis, so anytime you want to go anywhere that's not on campus, you fill out a whole form, and you say where you're going to go and who you're going with and what time you're leaving. You had to be in by 10 o'clock, so there was no problem with saying I'm coming in at 2. That didn't exist. And then you gave this to whichever of the nuns was the house mother, and you signed it always, your loving child. Or we were very glib, we put YLC, and we signed it, your loving child. And if they approved, then you could go out. It loosened up junior and senior year, so then they had a day book that you could sign in and out on. Going for a weekend, of course, by then we wanted to be with boys, and we knew boys at other colleges. So you wanted to go away for the weekend. Well, they had laid down the rules mightily by then. You could go as long as you signed ahead of time, told them where you were going, told them what hotel you were staying in, and they approved or didn't. The rule was, and it was strict, if you were observed in your room in the hotel with a partner with the boy, man, you were immediately expelled. if you were observed drinking or drunk, or you came back to campus drinking or drunk, you were immediately expelled. There was no tribunal, there was no appeal. The part that's strange, I guess, is we never questioned this. And I can't say that I felt that we were unfairly dealt with. We knew what the rules were. We knew what we were supposed to be doing. We just kind of did them. And it went easily. I don't think I knew of maybe 3 girls out of the 200 in the class who had issues. I don't even think they were thrown out, but who certainly, were rumored to have had problems and they had to go before the dean or whatever. It was just, that was the way it was, and you knew when you signed on, that was what you were signing on for. Nobody forced you to be there. And many of the other women's colleges had similar rules, maybe not quite as strict, but their house mothers were also in loco parentis, and it was their job to keep you safe.
How did going to this college affect your views on religion, and how has that impacted your life, even to this day?
It has. It has impacted my life. I would say a lot, and profoundly and inside. I don't think I walk around and try to tell other people what to believe or what faith they should have. I don't think I have a preference for what religious organization one should belong to. I think I do have a conviction, I guess, that God cares. And I think that's the ultimate, that God cares. But what I did in that time, we were required to take philosophy, 4 years of it. You could choose from a lot of neat courses, and they were great philosophy teachers. And you took 4 years of religion. But those 4 years of philosophy and religion were not somebody telling you, this is what you need to believe, at all. They were introducing you to Nietzsche and to Kierkegaard and to Aristotle, and they were taking you through history of philosophy and religion, and you were reading as close to the original as you could get. If you couldn't, you can't translate Greek or something, but that was what you did. And then you sat in class and you talked about this. What do we think of hell as other people? Or somebody else's concept that is against this modern concept. And you worked on those and you thought about them. Nobody came at you and said, as a Catholic, what do you think you should be believing? And so you puzzled it out and came out with whoever you wanted to be. But it gave me a wonderful opportunity not only to read all this stuff, and there were things that I was interested in. I guess if you weren't interested in where did the world come from, or why is it that people in every culture, no matter how primitive or how old or how modern, they all posit some form of origin. They all posit some form of give back. They all, they share so many pieces in common. And so you look at this whole thing and think, there has to be some unity in it. Doesn't mean I know the unity, but that there needs to be this. And then I got friendly with one of the nuns, one of the madams, who was this gorgeous-looking gal, actually. But I would go to her and ask her questions. I said, sit and talk to me. And she said, all right. So we would sit down and talk. And I would say, well, what do you think about this? Why do you believe that this and this is the case? Why does the church believe this and this? And she said, there's no point in my telling you. She said, you need to find your way. And she would give me, well, read this, and read a little bit of this, and see what those two are telling you, and then add a piece of this person. And it was all, and even some of it was poetry and literature, and then come back and talk. We would come back and talk. But I felt that somewhere along the way, by the end of that time, of those 4 years, that the idea of prayer or communicating, that there had to be, if there has to be a God, and this God has some interest in you, and that God, whatever it is, or whoever it is, whether it's Yahweh or it's Mohammed or whoever, I think they're all coming from the same place. There is some crossover, like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where you see the finger reach over and God reaches back and they touch. There has to be some communication, and you can call it prayer or whatever. But I think I carried that with me. Does it make me a great person? Not at all necessarily. It's just what plays in my head that I think this is, to me, the way the universe works. Is it really? Mm-hmm.
In that time, had Manhattanville been desegregated? Was it?
That's an interesting point. Had it been desegregated, we had 200 girls in our class. We may have had 3 who were black. And I don't know that it never occurred to me that it was a segregation issue. We were so oblivious. I can't tell you how painfully oblivious we were. And one girl was a good friend of mine. We went through math together, which we both hated, and it was required. So we had a lot of fun and we laughed about it. It never occurred to me she was any different. But then, of course, every summer I was in Trinidad, where the population is 98% non-white. So you don't even think of those things.
Yeah.
Do I think that Manhattanville promoted? They promoted the march. And they did do that. And they hired buses and everything. But I don't think, if you look at their demographics, and you have a population of 200 in our class, and 3 of them are black. I mean, some of them were Indian. We had people coming out of Cuba then, because their families had to leave. So they came out of Cuba and they sent their daughters to college also. But I think we were remote. And I think that was a lot of the problem in America, is that we didn't see it as our problem. It was a problem that Black America was having. And instead of seeing it as we are one, this should be our problem, I don't think we were looking at it properly. And in the 60s, we started to see, and also with Martin Luther King then, and these marches that were looking for a new way of making a statement. And it was a terrible time for them.
So, finally, to one of the last questions. When you're looking back at the 60s in general and here with me, how do you view them? How do you think about that time in your life?
Okay, it's a difference. I feel that I lived through the 60s, but I feel like I didn't live in the 60s. I didn't march when I should have marched. I wasn't here I graduated in 64, and I went to Trinidad, and I was gone from 64 to 67. And I had 2 little tiny kids away from the United States. What was going on was so remote. I feel like I dropped from 63, and we came back in probably 68 maybe. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was back in the United States, and political things were happening that, looking at it from Trinidad, I thought, like, oh my God, I've missed everything but the Beatles. You know, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent most of the 60s away, came back at the end of the 60s, and what I had to enjoy was the music. You know, it sounds so lame, but I said, what did I do? I was lame in the 60s. I was just young, married, away from home with 2 little kids, and trying to figure out, how do I grow up?
Thank you. And then finally, what events during your life in the 60s do you feel like most impacted you?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Because Woodstock I heard about, but it didn't impact.
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy impacted everybody. But when the role of women and college women and the choices that were open to women opened up, and women could choose who they married, when they married, to be raw if they wanted to have sex or they didn't. It wasn't prescribed by somebody else. Abortion. I mean, all of these things changed. Job openings. All of this changed the role of women, what they were doing with their time, what they were doing with their lives, and how they saw themselves, how we fit, where we fit. And that had a huge impact, because all of a sudden I reached, I guess, around over 30, and my kids were growing up, and then I started to look at, who do I want to be? What job would I like? What job would I enjoy? Where does the music fit with my life? Can I have it all? Can I have my family and the music and a career? And at that point, in the 60s, it turned around, and the answer was, yes, you can have it all. It's not going to be easy, but it was open. And I felt like that changed how I saw the world, and opportunities for women. And it was great.